Mr. Mike's World. You better put on your seatbelts because it's a dangerous road.
So chapter 19 is talking about the Renaissance and the Reformation. And section 1 is talking about the Italian Renaissance. Now, before the Renaissance, there was a disease that spread, and it was called the Black Death, and it killed a ton of people. But after the Black Death, there were actually some good things that happened. Because people who survived the Black Death could raise more food on the farms. And since there were less people, people got paid more for working on the farms. And so Europe's economy actually started to grow, and prices went down because people were starting to make more products. So there was some pretty good things that happened because of the Black Death. If you remember, the Romans would trade between 1 AD and 200 AD with the Chinese, and they used the Silk Road to travel. But when the Han Dynasty fell, they stopped using the Silk Road. And then in the 1200s, the Mongols took over China, and traders again started to use the Silk Road. One man who started using the Silk Road was a man named Marco Polo, and he traveled from Europe to China, and he became so famous that someone decided to just follow him around and write down all of the adventures that he had. By the 1300s, 4 cities had become trading centers in Italy, so places that there were a lot of trading coming out of there. Florence, Genoa, Milan, and Venice, and these cities had 2 important roles. First, they were ports into the Mediterranean Sea. And second, they were manufacturing centers, which means they would make crafts. Venice made glass, Milan made weapons and silk, and Florence made cloth. Now we'll be talking about Florence and the beginning of the Renaissance on pages 560 to 561 during class. So if you want, you can skim over them right now. But we'll move on to Italian artists on page 560. During the Middle Ages, people focused on studying religion. They also focused on human activities instead of the beauty of the world or on the nature of God. And this led to a movement called humanism, which is a way of thinking and learning that stresses the importance of human abilities and actions. People from Turkey brought a bunch of classical writings from the ancient Greeks, and the Italians loved it. So they looked for Roman writings too, and they based a lot of their own books on these Greek and Roman writings. There were a lot of great writers in Italy during the Renaissance. First was Dante, who wrote in Italian, which showed that he thought Italian was just as good as Latin. Then there was a guy named Machiavelli who wrote a book called The Prince, which gave leaders advice on how they should rule. Some of the best paintings and sculptures in the world came from the Renaissance. They tried to be as realistic as possible when drawing or sculpting people, and they got this idea from Greek classical art. There were 2 people who were geniuses. Michelangelo was the first, and he designed buildings, wrote poetry, carved sculptures, and painted amazing pictures. He painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which is what this is right here, in the Vatican. Probably the coolest genius was Leonardo da Vinci. He was a painter, sculptor, architect. He invented things, engineer, map maker, and he did so much more. Da Vinci studied the human body so that he could make his art more real, and he showed human emotions so well in his paintings. He painted the famous painting Mona Lisa. Now we'll go over section 2 during class, but here are some of the highlights. First, during the Renaissance, there were some great improvements in both science and education. There was a guy named Petrarch who said that history was very important. Imagine that. Second, there were these new ideas like Christian humanism, which is the mixture of humanist and religious ideas added together. And these ideas spread from the Renaissance all across Europe because of a few different things. Number 1, the development of paper. Number 2, the printing press, which was invented by Johann Gutenberg. And number 3, because of new universities. And these ideas were part of the Northern Renaissance, which was a more religious Renaissance than the Italian Renaissance. And it included people like Desiderius Erasmus. And Erasmus saw problems in the church, and he wanted to change them. Again, in section 3, we're talking about the Reformation of Christianity, and we'll go over it in class. So here's just kind of a brief overview as well. First, there was the Reformation, which was a movement that said that the Roman Catholic Church should change some things. And what ended up happening was that some of these reformers went and just started new churches. And these reformers are called Protestants, which were those who protested against the Roman Catholic Church. Second, kind of in response to the Reformation, the Catholics started a Catholic Reformation, which was where the Catholics were trying to stop the spread of Protestantism and reform the Catholic Church from within. And so they did not go and start new churches. Now, one group of people in this movement were called Jesuits, who were a religious order created so that they could serve the Pope and the Church. The most important meeting that the Catholics had was the Council of Trent, where they decided on some major issues in the church. Third, because of the Reformation, there were some wars because of the religion, and there was a lot of change in the society. The Protestants fought against the Catholics, and after 30 years of fighting, they created a peace treaty called the Treaty of Westphalia, which allowed the rulers of countries to decide whether they wanted to be a Catholic or Protestant. Also, the French Protestants were called Huguenots, and they banned all Protestantism in France. So they did not allow Protestantism at all in France. But then King Henry IV issued the Edict of Nantes, which gave religious freedom to most people in France. One other thing that started during this time was federalism. And federalism means that there was a big, strong government, but this big government would allow kind of smaller governments in each area of the country to have their own kind of government and power as well. So that is all that we have from Mr. Mike's World today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this helps you on your test. God bless.